In the top stories, Prime Minister Harris to take second dose of COVID-19 vaccine today. Mother in St. Lucia caught dangling child from balcony in police custody. And India's critical shortage of life-saving oxygen continues. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday newscast. Today's Tuesday, the 4th of May, 2021. I'm Jason Davis. Nationally, Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, who was among the first to take the first dose of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine on February 22, will later today take his second dose of the vaccine at the Sylvia Garnett Primary Healthcare Facility in Tabernacle. In a brief statement released on Monday, Prime Minister Harris said, quote, "Tuesday at 2 p.m. I go to the Tabernacle Health Center for my vaccine, second dose with security heads." The statement came on the heels of a COVID-19 vaccination session at the Sylvia Garnett Primary Healthcare Facility in Tabernacle on Saturday, following the latest edition of the Prime Minister's Health Walk. International Firefighters Day is being observed today, Tuesday, May 4, and local firefighters are using the occasion to bring awareness to the organization with a run through Basse-Terre. ZIZ News spoke to Basse-Terre Substation Officer Timothy Martin, who spoke of the significance of the day and their plans.
Sundown Road, across Big Bay Road heading west, up 4th Street, across Chaos Street heading west, down Church Street, across Liverpool Road heading east, up 4th Street, and across Chaos Street heading east, and back to the fire station. It's bringing awareness to the organization and today as well, Firefighters Day. So just letting the public basically see our officers in their numbers celebrating this day.
During the run, there was also a fire drill display at the junction of 4th and Central Streets. Awareness for the day began in 1999 after a proposal was emailed around the world on January 4 following the deaths of 5 firefighters in a bushfire in Australia. Meanwhile, Garfield Hodge, the acting chief fire officer, is urging firefighters to step up to the plate and get vaccinated. On Saturday, the acting fire officer was at the Sylvia Garnett Primary Health Center speaking about the importance of being vaccinated. Nurses Noreen Gabriel and Vivian Green Simon administered a dose of the vaccine to Fire Officer McJulian Isaac at the health center. Mr. Hodge's call comes as the nation continues its roll-up to roll-out vaccination campaign in a drive to reach 70% of the target population and achieve herd immunity. We now move to news on the regional scene. In St. Lucia, the mother caught dangling a child from the balcony of a house on pillars on a hillside is now in police custody. More in this report.
Onto the scene. One man familiar with the event spoke to News Force on condition of anonymity about how the harrowing images were captured.
So when he went outside, he saw this lady dangling the child over a balcony. So he called unto her, he told her, well, this is from that behavior. And then she started cursing him, because there's a video with that effect, could tell you that. So she started cursing him, so he replied with the abuse. And then he said, well, he threatened her by telling her, the police, he will video it and bring it to the police. Then she started cursing him again and telling him, go ahead, you can do it. So my son said, what? So my son went back inside, caught the phone. But he told me when this came with the phone, he thought when he went back, that this lady would have taken the child from the original position. But to his surprise, when he went, he saw that she was still having the child dangling. So he took the video.
The threat by the mother to drop her child from a height of about 12 feet, allegedly over a mobile phone, caused one caring neighbor to act. The mother was later brought in by police for questioning in relation to the matter, with the video getting into circulation after it was handed over to her brother.
He disposed the video, but he gave the video to her brother and her brother. And from there, that mother started getting on and filing knife and say she's going to prick my son and all kind of thing. I said, we'll have to deal with the police.
Have you reported the matter to the police?
She has been arrested.
This video comes to light against the backdrop of reports of increasing number of cases of children being physically and verbally abused, often by those under whose care they fall. Persons charged with the responsibility of keeping them safe and secure. Lucia for the HTS News Force.
The United Nations General Assembly declared May 3 to be World Press Freedom Day, or just World Press Day, which is observed annually to raise awareness of the importance of freedom of the press and remind governments of their duty to respect and uphold the right to freedom. TTT News' Terry-Ann Brown-Campbell reports on media freedom in Trinidad and Tobago and in Venezuela.
Thanks to my home to calling me, hey.
There are lots of freedoms we take for granted as journalists in our democracy, like freely criticizing and questioning the plans and decisions of our government and private sector. Grivik Alvarado, a Venezuelan journalist transplant working at the Trinidad Newsday, says a journalist's circumstance is different there. He recalls writing about a community issue that the local government did not agree with.
They sent to the funds to my home to calling me, hey, Grivik, you are bad journalist, you are opposition, or you are officially journalist, in different times.
He adds that depending on what he wrote, opposition parties or the government felt free to attack him.
They sent to me letters, message, anonymous, about if you continue writing about this problem, you will have problem. It is normal. It is normal for the journalists in Venezuela.
Mr. Alvarado says his mother, who is also a journalist, was threatened throughout her career by government officials, criminals, police officers and opposition parties. Trinidad journalist Regan Devines, who worked at Telesur in Venezuela, agrees that working there is no cakewalk.
Being a journalist in Venezuela, you walk a fine line. If you do anything and criticize the government too much, you can become a target.
He describes the fate of a colleague who crossed that fine line.
I have a good friend. His name is Cody Weddle. He worked in Telesur as well. When he left Telesur and became an independent journalist who was just working contractually, he did a few reports for either NBC or CBS on the Venezuelan government, and he was detained for a short time.
When we compare our situation here in Trinidad and Tobago with the Freedom of Information Act, online access to Hansard records, parliamentary debates and committee hearings broadcast live on the parliamentary channel, it may seem that we are quite free. But veteran journalist Jones P. Madera says our journalistic restraints are more subtle.
Trinidad and Tobago has come a long way in the context of press freedom. We have never had the kind of tremors that you hear in most countries, resulting in disciplinary parenthesis, procedures against journalists. But that does not mean there is not an underlying interference.
This from the man who was editor-in-chief at the Trinidad Guardian in 1996, led his senior editors in a walkout because of pressures brought by then Prime Minister Basdeo Panday for the newspaper's owners to fire him.
Owners and principals of media may have their likes and dislikes. They hide it all the time, and then the message comes down to the practicing editor in a very oblique way, and it is left to the editor to say to the principal, listen, I don't think we can do this because of our principle as journalists of this country. It has happened on a number of occasions, and I'm sure that it keeps happening today.
Mr. Madera's advice is for journalists not to sit back on their laurels, but to keep striving to practice their craft with honesty and integrity. Terry-Ann Brown-Campbell, TTT News.
Internationally, as many as 24 patients, including those with COVID-19, died in a hospital in Karnataka state in India after it ran out of oxygen. India's hospitals are struggling to deal with the world's steepest surge in cases. The country reported more than 350,000 cases and 3,400 deaths on Monday. Al Jazeera's Elizabeth Purnham reports.
Relatives of patients who died when this hospital's oxygen supply ran out are overcome with grief.
My boy had recovered 75%. If oxygen was available, he would have survived. But without oxygen last night, he died.
Others vent their anger at hospital staff in the state of Karnataka. One man said his brother called him at midnight asking for help.
We got a call at midnight that he's not getting his oxygen supply. He got married just 2 months ago. Now who will look after his family?
Karnataka is one of India's richest states, but also one of the worst affected. Few places in the country have been spared by the second wave of the virus. The capital, New Delhi, set up its first oxygen generation plant after more than 50 patients died when their supply ran out.
When we are completely dependent on supply chains and cylinders, then these problems are bound to arise. It is a great idea to overcome that problem. We have created an oxygen generation plant here. In simple words, it is a kind of oxygen concentrator, only with greater capacity.
Oxygen concentrators continue to arrive along with other international aid. Trains are being used to transport cryogenic tankers with liquid oxygen to those states hardest hit by the virus. The government has expanded the vaccination program to include everyone above the age of 18, but there are shortages of doses too. People have been waiting in a line outside this centre for hours. The vaccines arrived late and the process is taking much longer than expected. And that's only leading to more frustration for people standing in queues where proper social distancing isn't possible. Gladwin Rawat, like hundreds of others, waited for more than 3 hours for his jab.
I feel the delay in the center is the main issue because people have been waiting here since morning. They were told that the slot will open up at 10 o'clock, but they have been here like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And now we are getting, our turn to finally get in.
In some sites, vaccinations were delayed because of a lack of healthcare workers to administer them. To ease the pressure on the healthcare system, India's Supreme Court has asked the government to consider imposing a nationwide lockdown, but not before making arrangements for India's hundreds of millions of daily wage earners who must work every day to survive. Elizabeth Puranam, Al Jazeera, New Delhi.
Still on the international scene, a second trial has begun in Argentina over the systematic sexual abuse of deaf children at an institute run by the Roman Catholic Church. Al Jazeera's Daniel Schwimler reports.
Nicola Corradi and Horacio Corbacho in prison in 2019, both for more than 40 years. Now they'll again have to bring up those painful memories as 9 more accused are put on trial. The charges against them, including sexual abuse and corruption of minors.
Through much of their lives, they couldn't communicate because they didn't have sign language. The school prohibited it, so they couldn't describe what had happened to them. Then, no one believed them.
Not until a sign language teacher reported it in 2016. The accused this time include 2 nuns, 4 former directors of the institute, a psychologist and a cook, all who deny the charges against them. Lawyers for the victims say they have strong evidence and are confident they'll get convictions.
They tell you what no mother or father wants to know, that your child has been abused for a long time.
The Argentine Pope Francis has called child abusers ravenous wolves who must prepare for divine justice. But victims and those battling on their behalf say their case is part of a wider problem in Argentina and around the world, that the church authorities won't face what they're accused of.
The first thing that has to happen is what the United Nations said in 2014. The Catholic Church must stop systematic cover-ups of the evidence, because as long as they're doing that, there will be more victims.
The Provolone Institute has since been closed, but many questions about what went on behind those gates still remain. What the 9 are accused of, what the 2 priests have already been convicted of, represents for many a crime even more heinous because the children were deaf, because they were perceived to be more vulnerable. Therefore, the exploitation of trust by those responsible for looking after them seems to be even greater. Much of the trial will be conducted virtually as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to devastate Argentina. And with nearly 200 witnesses scheduled to testify, many of them requiring sign language interpreters, it could take up to a year exposing deep wounds that some must face and others would rather avoid. Daniel Schweimler, Al Jazeera, Buenos Aires.
And now for the weather. Current conditions are partly cloudy skies with a moderate breeze of 15 miles per hour from an easterly direction. The temperature is 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Seas are moderate with waves of 5 to 6 feet. And the weather forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis for today and tonight says to expect partly cloudy to cloudy skies with a 40% or moderate chance of showers. Sunset today will be at 6:32 p.m. Sunrise tomorrow at 5:43 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jason Davis.